Hello guys, welcome back to John's Workshop, and in this video we're going back onto the shaper, getting very near the end of this restoration now, so this is a bit of a final push. So this is going to be the drive pulleys, the belt pulleys, the lay shaft. That's all in front of it on the bench here. So there's the lay shaft unit with two pulleys on it, and the brake unit that's part of the lay shaft assembly. So in this video I'm going to try and minimise the amount of work that I do, because this lay shaft feels absolutely lovely inside in terms of the bearings, really do feel nice. So I'm really not intending to strip all of this down, pull all the bearings out, faff around with it. This is just going to be a clean up. I will probably take the pulleys off. I'm going to, when I finish painting, flush a load of grease through, which should come out through the grease nipple here, out both ways, to purge the old grease and put some fresh grease into the bearings, and then clean the pulleys up, refit them. It's largely going to be that, so it's not going to be too exciting, this video, unfortunately, but it's a very vital part of me getting the shaper near the end. So I think I've probably covered everything on the board, so with all of that being said, we'll crack on and get stuck into the start of just getting the pulleys off and starting the initial cleanup, and I'll show bits and bobs of that during the video, a bit of the painting, and I'll major most of the time on the reassembly and refit back to the machine when we're done. So I'll join you in a minute at the bench when we get stuck right into it. Okay, so this is what we're dealing with. So we've got the pulley that goes onto the machine shaft itself. We're going to attack that first and get that cleaned up and ready to refit to the machine. As you've just seen, we've got the lay shaft unit with a pulley on each end, single pulley at the belt drive side, and multiple pulley on this side that meshes with this pulley through the belt. And then we've got the mounting bracket that holds the lay shaft in position, and also the brake lever arm, which is this one, so the clutch and the brake lever arm. So this is a clutch for the machine to knock it out of gear almost, or out of movement, and it's also got a brake on it to stop any movement. If you that brake actually works into the pulley itself. You'll see the V shape on it, and that sits into one of the grooves on the pulley to actually brake the machine. So I'll get my stuff together and we'll crack on with the initial cleanup. There's a lot of muck on these, especially on this one. It's absolutely caked in grease and sawdust and muck, so we're going to get this one done first. Okay, we're just done cleaning this first pulley up, so we've just given that a wipe and got rid of, I think, what was decades of muck in the back of there. So that's all out now as a rough cleanup. And what I'm doing is I've opted for the manual method with this because it's not taking long, and I am just using some Scotch-Brite on the pulley just to clean it up and get all the muck off it. For how long it's going to take me, you know, it's a few minutes. Why am I doing it by hand? I could put it in the lathe, make life easier for myself. I'd need to turn a mandrel up of some description to go down this bore. I wouldn't want to be gripping any of these ODs in the chuck jaws, because you'll mark up the edge, which then leads to belt wear and goodness knows what else. So it's safe for the component to do it by hand, and more than that, it's safe for me to do it by hand. I watched a guy many years ago lose 2 fingers trying to polish one of these in a lathe, and he was using long bits of emery cloth, and then he just went in to do the final bits, and you know what happens. The taper wedges in there, if they get hold, that's it. So this way, nice and safe, couple of minutes. I don't have to turn a mandrel up, I don't have to switch my 4 jaw over for my 3 jaw, and the job's done. So I'm just going to carry on cleaning this up. I'm not going to go mad with it. I just want to get all of the crap out of it really. And I'll go over it with a file if there's any lumps and bumps, just knock those off, make sure all the pulley areas are nice and smooth. And that's pretty much going to be it. I'll take the paint off the back and I'm just leaving the rest of that as it is, cleaned out. I'm not going to do any more than that with these. They're belt pulleys at the end of the day. So I'll bring you back when I'm on the next bit. Okay, we've got our first pulley finished. We're now moving on to the lay shaft. So first job, I know I said I wasn't stripping this down, but I am, just in as much as we're going to take the 2 pulleys off if we can get them off without needing to resort to brute force and ignorance. So we've got 1 grub screw on one end and 2 on the other. That's a good start. I guess that's the easy bit. Now I need to work out how easily or not these are going to come off the end of the shaft. So I'm going to go and get myself some I'll just put a bit of penetrating oil in there, WD, for a minute. I'm going to go and get a couple of levers and we're going to try and lever this off from the centre where there's all this mass behind it, rather than trying to use a 3-legged puller on the outer of this, which is more likely to crack. I think this feels like some kind of dural type material, so I need to be a bit careful with this. So I'm going to try a couple of levers in under here in the centre and see whether we can lever this pulley off. Okay, we've got a couple of levers that I actually made as an apprentice. So what we're going to do is see whether we can drop those one in at each side under the centre and see whether, well, that's positive, got movement. So I've had to kind of resort to a bit of brute force and ignorance, but I'm trying to keep it fairly sensible, so I'm just using a brass drift and just literally and it is coming. Well, there we go. That's got that off. Not quite sure what was causing that to be so tight. We'll clean it up and have a look. But what I was trying to do there when I was tapping the back was tap as much as possible where these 4 webs were, where it's obviously got a bit more strength. But I really wasn't hitting it hard really, it's just gentle taps. So that's got one off. We've got a key in there which is finger tight, so we'll take that out before we lose it. And then we'll switch this round and see if we can get this other end off. Did I say I wasn't stripping this down? Wrong. Right, I can't get this pulley off this end, and I don't want to resort to brute force and ignorance, so I've taken, there was a spacer ring on here that held the whole thing together. So I've taken that spacer ring off and I'm now going to withdraw the entire shaft, just make sure this, I'm not going to drag any muck through, because there's obviously needle roller bearings I think in here. Yep, there's one of them. that's nasty. It's now I'm going to call that groil, because it's neither grease or oil, that it's just kind of some horrible in between kind of substance. I guess on a plus note, it's kept the shaft pretty clean. Right, I've obviously pulled one of the needle bearings out here, so I need to be careful with that. I'm just going to take that back to the bench and we'll have a look at what we can do with that. We'll carefully get this bearing off and keep it out of harm's way, and then we'll start attacking cleaning up this pulley. Might as well leave it on the shaft while I'm at it. So I'll bring you back when we're doing that. Okay, we've got all the groil off there. So interestingly, this has got some kind of a, I think this is probably some kind of a grease seal at this end where the bearing, where one of the needle roller bearings butts up to it. I'm not really sure. It looks machined, it's certainly not worn like that. So what I've done with this one is I've tightened up both the grub screws back onto the shaft. I'm not going to try and part these two, there's no point. I know it's still at the right place on the shaft, it's not moved. So we'll just clean the whole thing up as a one, the shaft and the pulley. What I have done is, now I've cleaned it, is realised why the other pulley was tight coming off. There's just a bit of raised material here where the grub screw at some point, or a grub screw, has been incorrectly positioned with respect to that flat, and it just raised a bit of material. So I've taken that off. So I'm going to crack on now, same as you saw me do on this one, to clean this pulley and shaft up. I'll not show that. I'm also going to clean this one up in a very similar way, just to get the worst of the dross off it. I've got my 2 needle roller bearings and the spacer in there and the key, so I can't lose them, he says. So we're going to crack on with that. I'll bring you back when I've done it all, and then we'll move on to the actual lay shaft housing itself. Okay, we've got our second pulley cleaned up and the shaft. It's taken about 10-15 minutes just to get that to a state that I'm happy for it to go back on the machine. We've found some animal DNA while we were doing that, so somebody in the past has obviously got to the same point I got to, where they realised that this pulley wasn't going to separate itself from this shaft without a fight, and rather than doing what I did, which was just strip the whole unit down to get what they needed, decided the next course of action was a hammer and screwdriver. So they thumped in here, which is wet right up to the collar. So there's a big ding in the outer side, which doesn't matter too much, but what they'd also done was slightly bellowed the inside of this smallest pulley flank. So what I've done is just gently work that with a file and with some emery to get that back to, as best I can feel with my finger, a smooth transition with the rest of that flank, and I think that will be perfectly okay to refit. So I'm now going to move on to the other pulley, the Dural one. I'll not show that when I'm done, it's more of the same. It will look like that when we start, and it will hopefully look more like that when I'm finished. So I'll do that, and then I'll bring you back when we're onto the lay shaft. Okay, we've got our castings all painted up, decent bit of masking done. I've had to paint this particular unit all assembled because these 4 pins that hold this shaft in here weren't coming out without a fight, so I just decided to mask around them with a bit of careful masking when I did the painting, so I'm happy with how that's come out. The ball on the end was well chromed, so we've left that as chrome, but the chrome was starting to fade away, so we've painted up to a line with the masking. Quite happy with all of that. we've cleaned these bearings out. Now these are something really special. I've never come across anything like these before. They're obviously roller bearings of some description. There is absolutely no numbers, no kind of denomination on these whatsoever, and each of the rollers has got some spiral, I'm guessing grease movement grooves on them. Really interesting. I've never come across anything that looks quite like that before without a part number on it. So we've got both of those cleaned up. Excuse the background noise, we're in the deep freeze here. It was -12 this morning, that's degrees C, when I got up, and it got up to the dizzying heights today of -4 at its warmest, and it's now going right back down again, so the heating is staying on, unfortunately. So we're going to get these set up now. We're going to get this unit set up and start rebuilding the reverse of how I stripped it down. So we've got our ultimate soft jaws in the vise, otherwise known as an old t-shirt. I've put one roller bearing in this end, I'm just doing the other one. So some high quality SKF bearing grease, and a lot of it, and I'm just working that all the way into this bearing, both from the inside and the outside, until I can't physically pack any more into that anywhere. I think that's fairly well greased up. So we're just going to drop that in this end. We've cleaned all the bore out. I'm just going to stick some more grease into this recess at this end. Now we can take our pulley, try not to get grease all over it, John, and that's the first part of the rebuild done. I'm going to get my hands cleaned up and we'll bring you back as we're refitting the other pulley on this end. Okay, there's our key. Just going to drop that back into the keyway. Make sure it's seated, which it hasn't. And now for our second pulley. Okay, we've got our pulley back on here, and to get our pulley back on here I've had to disassemble all of this again, because it's 12 months since I took it apart, couldn't remember the order it came apart in, came to put this back on and realised that it has to go on before you install all of this lot. So all of this lot's had to come back off. So I've got it all back in place. I still need to re-time up my ratchet with the ram movement, so need to do that again, but largely that's got our pulley on there now and it's all nice and smooth. So for anybody who doesn't know, when you upload a video to YouTube, you get asked lots of different questions, such as, is this video made for children, or have you used any gratuitous language or political statements and that kind of thing, and you have to answer all the questions. I can absolutely tell all of you that when I found that out, the language that got used in here, there weren't even any checkboxes on YouTube for it. Therefore, we've lost the footage of putting this pulley on, but I'm sure you get the idea. So we're now going to move to the back and put on the bits and pieces that we've just been doing in this video. So on reflection, it was also probably a mistake putting this on, but I think I can work around it. So we're going to start putting our bits and pieces back on. So we're just going to put a smear of oil on this back face before we fit it to the back of the machine, just to try and prevent any corrosion. And then okay, now for the lay shaft, and this really is a memory test because I honestly don't even remember taking this apart. That's obviously not right. That looks more like it. We've got a washer that goes on there. A washer that goes in here. This is going to be fun. There we go. That's got our lay shaft back in position and our clutch mechanism for the belt tension all working. So here's our brake. It's just a Tufnell pad that's shaped to go into the last V of the top pulley, and we've just cleaned that up. Got all the muck and grease off it, and this goes onto here. He says. we go. Well, there we go guys, that gets us to the end of part 11 of the Shaper restoration, so another good step closer to the end point, so I'm pleased with that, and we are getting very near the end of this now, so probably 2 more episodes left. I would think. I've got the guards to fit, the pulley guards to fit, now we've got all the pulleys on, and then finally the motor, which will need a strip and a clean and a bit of TLC, make it look nice, and then we'll refit the motor, and then I've got the electrics to do, which will take a bit more time. Rewiring, I'm going to completely rewire this, so yeah, 2 or 3 more episodes in this series I think, and then we should be ready to switch it on and see if it all performs, and I'm really looking forward to that, so that's keeping me going. As I said at the start of the year, interspersing this with the mill upgrades and projects, so it's taken me pretty much 12 months to get to this stage with this machine, so, and we're not there yet, but we're going to keep cracking on with it. So I hope you've enjoyed that. Thank you to the subscribers and the new subscribers as always, and we'll catch you all very soon on another video when we'll be making something else.